Okay, it's 11:30 and we have lots to talk about, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much to everyone who's participating in this year's perennial farm gathering, and a special welcome to folks that are joining us just for this session and have joined us before for the Agroforestry series that we co-host with Liberty Prairie, Delta Institute, and supported by the EPA. We're recording all of our sessions, including this one. And so you'll have access afterwards to everything. And this one will also be available on YouTube for free within the same playlist of all of our other great agroforestry series webinars. So if you didn't attend, don't worry. If you have someone in your life that's attending another session or wasn't able to make it, just share that link when it's available in a couple weeks. A reminder, though, that Robin Wall Kimmerer's keynote will only be available to the 9th. So watch that and share that before the 9th, and then that one will be gone, but the Q&A will still be available. So we've all spent a lot of time on Zoom, but I'm just going to go over a couple simple Zoom etiquettes. We're going to ask that folks stay muted until maybe asked to become unmute. We're going to have a pretty free-ranging conversation today. We'll be getting comments and questions from the audience. We might ask you to unmute. If we do that, we'll let you know. But otherwise, stay on mute for better sound quality. Please utilize the chat. The PFG is really amazing and folks having lots of great connective conversations and sharing resources. So keep that chat on fire and feel free to share stories in the chat as well. We want this to be more of a conversational space. And there's a great resource spreadsheet that's been shared that lots of folks are already utilizing. So either my Savanna Institute colleague, Fred or Barbara are going to link that in the chat. And that's where lots of resources are going to be kept. Most sessions are on different Zoom channels. So oftentimes they're left open at the end, but we're right before Roskay's keynote. So we'll probably close out this room pretty fast. So there won't necessarily be a hallway moment for this one. And so without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce our partners for this particular webinar, Beyond Planting, the Art and Oh Shit of Maintaining Agroforestry Systems. And just as a disclaimer, there's probably going to be a slight amount of cursing on today's conversation. If there's a podcast, I'd say check out a beeped episode on thisamericanlife.org or some other podcast. But so if you have sensitive ears, this might not be the best session for you, but we'll try to keep it clean as much as possible. And so I'm really happy to introduce Lucas Chamberlain from the Delta Institute.
So thank you, Kaitie. We are so happy to be here, to be partnering with the Savanna Institute and Liberty Prairie, rather. They've been fantastic partners in our work to just share educational resources with producers towards implementing agroforestry. Delta Institute, just briefly, we're a nonprofit environmental organization. We're centered in Chicago, but we work throughout the Midwest and the Great Lakes region just to help producers implement and adopt conservation practices. So as opposed to focusing on policy issues, things like that, our focus is really on getting these practices in the ground and assisting producers in any way we can, whether that's financial incentives or educational resources like these webinars. So thank you for having me, and I can pass it off to Nathan.
Thanks, Lucas, and thanks, Kaitie. It's really great to be here as well. It's been great to partner with Savanna Institute and Delta over the last 2.5 years. So we are a nonprofit in the Prairie Crossing Conservation Community in Grays Lake, Illinois. We have a 94-acre farm that we manage, and we use that to demonstrate and show different ways for plants, animals, and people to thrive together. We actually hosted a food forest event with Savanna Institute 2 years ago, or last year, I believe. And we do have a food forest, and we're going to be exploring other different ways that we can use the farm to demonstrate good land management and good stewardship systems. We're actually going through a change. We're no longer Liberty Prairie Foundation, we're Liberty Prairie. That reflects some new activities and focus. The primary focus is actually going to be education and working and bringing high school students here to learn about trees and farming and all those kinds of things as well. So again, we're delighted to be here. Thanks, Kaitie.
Thanks to those great partners that have helped the Savanna Institute, whom most of you are familiar with, really work on getting widespread agroforestry adoption out on the landscape here in the Midwest. And we're very thankful for the US EPA for their support of this project that's focused on how agroforestry outreach and education and really culture building around trees can help with water quality issues, both in our waterways here and also in the Gulf of Mexico. So without further ado, I'm going to open our session today, and I'm so excited to welcome three of my favorite agroforesters to here in person. You probably can't tell, but we're actually sitting across the table from each other, but my house is so small that we can't sit on one side of a table. And they're all based here in the flatlands of Central Illinois. And you might not know it, but Central Illinois, which during the growing season is usually full of corn and soybeans, is also a hotbed of perennial farming and agroforestry. And these three folks here show that that's really possible and have just been doing so much phenomenal work here in the flatlands. When I first moved to this area 5 years ago to start my career in agroforestry, Mark and Tammy and Eric were really the first folks that I connected with and learned from on the ground here. And Mark and Tammy have been just a huge inspiration for me around the ways that we manage diverse systems of perennials with low inputs. And I wouldn't be half the agroforester I was without them, and also with Eric Wolske, who I've had many, many, many hours and conversations and troubleshooting with, maybe over a couple alcoholic beverages. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that all three of these people are also amazing booze farmers and make phenomenal things out of perennial crops. But in many ways, the three folks sitting across from me today kind of exist on opposite ends of the matrix spectrum. So Tammy and Mark manage 3 acres of diverse trees and shrubs and animals that come into those systems, like bees and chickens, and as well as do annual production. While Eric and Canopy Farm Management, who he's the director of agronomy for, manage hundreds and hundreds of acres. Everything from some monoculture perennial plantings to very diverse agroforestry systems. And so across the table, we have representative management systems that are organic and conventional, small scale and large scale, hand tools and hand work, all the way up to large scale mechanical work. But all of the work they do have the shared goals of diverse perennial production that's easier on the body, that increases biodiversity, and feeds a heck of a lot of people. So today we're going to have a conversation around all the things that happen kind of after the designs and plans are finalized, after the trees go in the ground, and where everything can go wildly right or wildly wrong. And for lack of a better term, the shit gets real. So to open our time together, we're Tammy and Mark and Eric are going to give us a lay of the land of they're working with, and then we'll talk through the good, the bad, and the ugly of tree tubes and weeds and pests, and then we'll open up the floor to questions and stories from all of you here in the audience. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce Tammy and Mark Allen of Autumn Mill Farm and Eric Wolske of Canopy Farm Management. And Tammy and Mark, do you want to kick us off?
Oh, sure.
And I'll share your photos too.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Oh.
Back in 2014, I read Mark Shepard's book, Restoration Agriculture, and found myself very inspired to repurpose this piece of ground that you see in this image. It was degraded pasture, and
This was what, about 4 years ago?
maybe 3 to 4 years ago. Degraded pasture. All I was doing was mowing it. Somebody would come in for hay once in a while, paying property taxes on this. And then at about that same time, I just had a change of consciousness after caring for my mother through cancer. And I decided to start planting trees. And everything that you see here was done by hand and not machine. So every tube that you see, there was a shovel in the ground. And then,
Yep. And every bush between all of the trees.
because between all of those tubes that you see, that's chestnut and pawpaw.
And apple and
And apples and hazelnuts.
hazelnuts.
So between the chestnuts and pawpaws, there's black currants and gooseberries. and scattered throughout the rest of the 10 acres. Blackberries, raspberries, elderberries, honeyberries, the currants, I've got those,
Pawpaws and the persimmons and
and
northern pecan
and
and
walnut.
walnut and butternut and cherries,
Yeah.
peaches, apricots, plums.
Yeah, okay.
So
You get the
yeah,
idea.
yeah. And not only is it, and there, that's probably a
Like,
little bit later photo, but not only are we diverse in this different varieties of trees, but also in the different cultivars of each variety of tree. So we have several cultivars of persimmons, several cultivars of pawpaws, several cultivars of chestnuts.
yeah, so it
just goes on and on. Different currants, different gooseberries, everything.
not putting all of your eggs in one basket, diversity.
Yeah, there's a picture of some of our pawpaws, which we're really proud of them because
that's a seedling.
that's grown from a seed to the tree. That's about it.
And that's my hand for
yeah.
scale. That's a woman's hand for scale.
So it's about a 6-year from seedling to one of them will have different bloom times, different harvest times, different way they react to pests and the environment. So if you got one of them that doesn't do well, hopefully the other variety will do well. So, and then from year to year, they may switch off because of conditions like weather and pests and everything else. So we always will have something to pick at the end of the year.
And why in straight rows?
For maintenance.
Easy maintenance. You can mow between them. You can have annual crops in between them.
Well, we have asparagus.
But we have
asparagus.
Yeah, we've got
rhubarb.
Asparagus and rhubarb in between some of them. The rows. Some of the rows have got sunflowers. Some of it's got buckwheat. There's white clover sown all the way through the entire plot there, and that's mainly for the bees. We have bees, and so if I don't think you can see any of the hives in that picture.
No, you can't.
But yeah, do a lot of our seedling growing in that hoop house that you see there, as well as growing annuals almost 12 months out of the year in there of some kind. Well, the little building is our cider shack, so we do cider processing, and hopefully one day we may be doing our honey processing in there also. But
And if not, it might be something for agritourism. Because I do have a kitchen set up in there, and it would be not too far of a stretch to make it a livable space.
And how many folks work on the land?
2.
Two, yeah.
Yeah, 2. There's not many people want to come out and help because they like to come out and look, but then when they see how much work it is, they're like, yeah, I don't think so.
And it's surprising how many people really don't know how to operate a shovel.
Yeah. It's a complicated piece of equipment.
It is.
And where is all the produce going now and for the future?
Right now, it's mostly being processed for personal use and gifting.
Yeah, we do a lot of gifting.
Because right now we're in that in-between stage between
producing a whole lot
and producing enough to sell. So we don't have the volume yet that I feel that we need to do some serious marketing.
Yeah, and then when you think you're going to have that year where then the weather comes and gives you one of those shit moments like this last summer. But yeah, what we grow, if we can't use it, we give it to neighbors, and we have a
barter with it.
We have a local food pantry that we
donate to.
So
great. We're going to get into a whole lot more, but that's a really great introduction to the farm. And Eric, now it's your turn to introduce yourself and your work.
All right. So I'm Eric Wolske. I'm I'm with Canopy Farm Management right now. I've been in the probably agricultural space for the past 10 years or so. I've done a lot of schooling for it. That was, I think, experience was coming from it. I spent some time working in vineyards. That was the first real bite of perennial agriculture that I had, which really sung to my soul as, again, becoming a booze cropper. That's my first experience of going from pruning the grapes to getting them healthy, keeping them growing through the season, keeping all the darn birds and bugs off of them, to actually making my first time making wine was with the old school foot press. I was out there and just dancing along to some classical and bluegrass was what I found to be the best pairing for that activity. And so then I spent some time also doing like restaurant work, and then I started grad school at the U of I. And that's where I started doing the black currants. That was really kind of my bread and jelly. And so with that, I was able to get a lot of experience with various crop systems in particular. Really got to expand my knowledge out from grapes into apples, chestnuts, hazelnuts, obviously black currants, red currants, a whole slew of other ones. And I was also able to see, differences in organic management, conventional and systems along those lines. And so then that brought me slowly over to Savanna Institute. We had a lot of people from Savanna Institute were here in Champaign, and was extensively both in the research space and outside space and all the other little farmer meetups we had in the area. And that brought me then to Canopy. So that's been sort of my journey now with Canopy. We, as Kaitie mentioned, we're a contract company, so we do a lot of management for clients, and that also provides a ton of opportunity for me to see the whole gambit of sizes of farms, types of farms, everything from like Kaitie mentioned, straight monocrops of berries, all the way up to very diverse mixes of perennial polycultures and alley crop systems, and working with the row croppers as well as the orchardists as well as the foresters. So really provides a great opportunity for myself to see all the potentials out there and what we can be doing and what's working and all the things that are not working as well. So a lot of opportunity for the oh shits and the oh yays.
Can you talk a little bit about Canopy and their management services and how they approach the work of agroforestry?
Yeah, so Canopy, we work with our clients. So we do everything from establishment. So we have some clients that come to us and say they just want a couple windbreaks put out on their property, all the way up to we have some clients that want us to do the full range of management. And for all of them, we sit down with the clients and we work through with what they want, how they want them managed, and we come up with our management plans with them. And then we take those management plans and put them into action. And so, and so we use a lot of equipment. And again, our big thing is, since we're doing so many properties, it's all mobile. So everything from our shop gets put onto a trailer, gets brought to the fields, unloaded from the trailers, then used, then put back on the trailers, go to the next side or go back to the shop. And so that adds a whole nother layer of logistical difficulties of making sure we have the right size equipment to get the tasks done at a good time, making sure that they actually fit the sites that we're doing, because we have such a wide range of sites that we manage, and making sure we have the right equipment that is cost effective both for us as a company and for the clients as well. So there's sort of a balancing act there of making sure we have the right thing that isn't cost prohibitive for either of us, but is also efficient and effective enough to get done at a reasonable time scale.
Great. I think we're having issues with our sound. So apparently it's good. We're good. I'm going to stay off camera for right now because I think maybe it's my internet, but make sure that you all have the spotlight here. Thank you for the introduction to Canopy and to Autumn Mill Farm. But let's get into you have to move this mic. Let's get in. This is a no shit moment where we're trying to figure out how to capture a bunch of sound in a room here when we're all together. But let's get into let's see if we can put it. Let's see if that'll work right there. So let's get into the nitty gritty and let's start the conversation around how you maintain plantings and how that maintenance helps you achieve your goals. So maybe Tammy and Mark, I'll start with you.
Well,
What do you do?
well, the first thing after we get the tree in the ground, whether it's a shrub or a bush, whatever it is we're planting, it's tree tubes. I think those are probably the number one most important thing to help your trees go is the tree tubes.
Well, you won't have a tree without one.
Right. And then you can work around, go from there. But we've actually tried 3 different types of tree tubes.
And you brought them, right?
And I brought an example of them, yes. Because there's a couple of them, one of them we have to modify.
Which one do you want to start with?
Oh, I'll give the 2 that we don't want. Okay. This one here, and this is just a bottom part of one. They are ventilated. They come in all different sizes, all the way up 6 foot. But they're green, so I don't think they get as much good light to the tree as the clearer ones. And then another thing, these come in packages of 5, which they are nested. So you get one real nice big tube, and then a smaller one, and a smaller one, and a smaller one. So when you get to that 5th one, you've got a little bitty tube like that just doesn't work
It's
very
not
well.
terribly effective.
So this one we don't get anymore. And that is a Tubex CompuTube is what that's called. So the brand name is Tubex.
All right.
This one here is the Tree Pro. It's got ventilation, but not a whole lot. They come in all the various sizes again. These we like for the pawpaws and stuff. They really won't like these. But again, these come nested, so you get one big one and then a smaller. So that tends to be a little bit of a problem. So we have those, but we don't use them much. Then this is a plantra. We like plantras. We use a lot of those. The only thing about the plantras was that the tops of them were very sharp. So that in the wind, which we have lots of wind, it would cut the tops. The tree would come out of the tube, and as it's moving like this, and the tree is moving like this, it would actually cut the tree off. Now, in places where there's not a lot of wind or have wind protection, it's not a big issue. So what we did, and I don't try to get this to where we can see it. We cut this up like this and feather that. It makes it real soft. The trees don't get any damage after that. The other thing that would happen was, as this tube was doing this in the wind, it would actually drill down into the ground as much as a foot deep and start cutting your roots. So in order to keep that from happening, another modification, we just made 4 cuts to where it would lay like this on the ground, and it took care of that. So these are great tubes. If you're living in a windy area, you need to modify them. If you don't have to do anything. But these are the ones that we personally have found best. Now, I wouldn't say
For everybody.
We're just giving you information of what really works well for us, and this one works well for us.
And what was the name of the first one?
It was a
Tubex.
Tubex.
Yeah, CompuTube.
Compa
CompuTube.
combination.
And there's a question in the chat around mice and voles. How are you dealing with mice and voles and tree tubes, especially?
You will have mice and voles and tree tubes. I don't care. I don't care what you do. I don't care how much stuff you put around it. They will, if they want in, they find a way in. So you just have to
Overwhelm them with
overwhelm
numbers,
them.
with the number of
Plant,
trees.
plant hundreds of trees, and if you get voles and mice in half of them, yeah, half of them won't. So
Yeah, Eric, I think one of the things that's exciting is that Canopy has been working with Plantra on different tree tube options for different things.
Yeah, so we like our planter tubes as well. We also had the same issues with the wind. And so at one point we reached out to Planter and we said we are having severe wind problems with the tubes drilling in the ground with trees girdling on the top. And Planter kind of was a little surprised. They hadn't seen that before. They didn't think that could be a possibility. And then they came down one very blustery spring day and were like, oh, yeah, okay, you guys are like a great case study of what some extreme conditions might be. And Champaign County, Central Illinois is a very, very windy place. So we've been working with them. We actually have some custom made tubes that help with our herbicide applications and protect the trees a little bit better, and are working with them on trying to find some other solutions as well, although you guys have nailed it. So
Yeah, but it's more labor.
it's a lot more labor, and the whole process of tree tubing is already very labor intensive.
Yes.
You know, after you've already spent a whole time getting the trees in the ground,
And
trying to get the
mistake,
tubes and going and checking the tubes and checking them for the mice and the voles
And the birds.
bluebirds and
yeah,
yeah, so they're a lot of work, but it's a lot less work than I think an untubed tree management, and just losing them. We've seen a lot of untubed trees where the bucks will scrape and completely girdle the trees or chomping the tops, and you have these what's supposed to be a tree turning into a shrub, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's challenging.
Yeah, what's some of the rules of thumb for when you take tubes off? It's not just set it and forget it.
Yeah, we've experienced that in the last couple of years where some of our trees
are actually getting.
outgrowing these tubes.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, the size was large enough by that point that I wouldn't be affected by the bugs rubbing, but it was like dinner bell. The ring, ding, ding, ding.
Yeah.
The tubes are off. We've got a good place to
Yeah.
to rub now.
Yep.
It's because once we took off all those tubes, we had rubbing.
Mhm.
So the only thing I can hope for now is that the trees are all strong enough and resilient to withstand it. I've got a handful of them that they've really taken about half of the bark off.
Mm-hmm. That's the same with us. I mean, as soon as they start outgrowing the tubes, you know, you don't want the tubes to start girdling the trees.
Yeah, and they will do that.
And
And
we started having that.
Yep.
Where we had to take them off. There was no choice.
But we also noticed, like, yeah, within 1 week, the deer are right on them. They knew it. They come and check. One of our sites, we actually put a trail cam out just to watch and see what's happening out there. And yeah, sure enough, those deer are checking pretty much every night. They stop by and take a little gander and eat all of our elderberries.
Yeah. There's something about elderberry
They
that they
love
love.
those. It helps. They know it.
Someone asked a question about the bluebirds, and birds and keeping birds out of tubes.
Those nets that they send with the tubes. Don't think, oh, these won't do any good. Yeah, put them on, because the ones that we did put the nets on, no birds. But the ones that we didn't put nets on, we had birds that would fall in there.
No, it wasn't real frequently, but it was enough to.
Yeah, any bluebird that you find dead in the bottom of your tube.
It's disheartening.
Yeah. And then there's a question here about cicadas.
Yeah.
Coming next year, we're going to have the overlap of two broods here in Central Illinois.
This will be our first year that we will have the cicadas in our area. We missed the first. When we planted in 2014, there hasn't been any cicadas in our area since 2000.
What I am
11 or 12
hoping
or what-
for
yeah.
is that I know where the cicadas, when we had cicadas before, they were in areas that we'd already planted. In areas that had some trees before, and they tend to stay very close to where
They emerge.
That our planting was 2014. I'm hoping that I have some grace that because it's all new, that I won't have the level of cicadas that I've seen in other areas. That would be a blessing if it works out that way. But we talked the other day about some possible solutions to
Grazing the tree.
greasing the tree with using vet wrap and I don't know, Vicks. Talked about Vicks, but suppose a food grade grease or some other Vaseline. So I don't know. We'll experiment.
Is Canopy doing anything?
We're also looking into what the potential solutions might be, because we haven't been a company for the cicadas. So this will be another great opportunity for learning, I like to call them. And so we're hoping to find something. Hopefully some people can drop some ideas in the chat for us. And
I do understand that if you let ducks out, that they can do a lot of work.
We would have some fat ducks.
some guinea hens maybe.
Yeah, that ducks might be effective if you wanted to do that, and I would be all for that. I've talked about Mark of even going as far as taking a generator out there and a shop vac and get them while they're still alive with a shop vac and freeze them for chickens.
Mhm.
It would be really crunchy. Well, let's talk about, we talked a little bit about tree tubes. Let's talk about pests since we're already on cicadas. So what are you doing for pests? And we'll take it all the way from tiny insects to birds and the like.
Well,
What's worked and what hasn't worked?
we are trying to be as totally organic as we possibly can. So we don't spray for bugs or fungus or disease or anything like that. We take the approach, if the plant cannot survive in our area pretty much on its own, it goes, and when you replace it with something else that might. That's another, goes back to our diversity. We're planting so many things and trying to figure out what works well in our area and what doesn't. So if we get a lot of bugs, or like this year we had the potato leafhopper that really whacked us pretty good because of the trees were stressed anyway because of the drought and the early or late frost and all that. So we just dealt with not having any chestnuts this year, or a lot of our apples and things like that. So
Since we're talking about pests, I've got the tubes for most of the voles and the mice and the rabbits. Rabbits are also very hard on the elderberries. The elderberries, unless they're right next to your house, I don't know how anybody gets them to survive if you have deer
or rabbits.
or rabbits. You just, I want to hear from somebody who's got the secret to that. Because I have tried and tried and tried on elderberries. Insects have really not been too much of a problem, because I think because of the plantings that we have done, we've added in a lot of diversity. Because of all the diversity we've added, we're getting more diversity in. We're seeing birds and snakes that we have never seen before now coming in.
And that they help.
And they help. So that's my pest management. Tree tubes and diversity, I suppose.
Eric, a little bit different approach with Canopy farm management.
A little bit, but also very similar. We do our best to select, resistant varieties, but specifically for the diseases. There's only a few of the plants that we found that we needed to start spraying fungicides for. That was really one cultivar of black currants that we had some issues with, that we had planted out. And this was research days, Eric. I was very excited to find this disease because I was a researcher, and now turning into farmer Eric, it's really troubling. It's really troubling.
And it's
paint dieback.
It's more work.
It is, and it's costly. It costs a lot of money. So we do our best for the diseases in particular, to do disease resistant plantings. And for insect pests, so far we actually we haven't had to do any sprays yet, but this year was the first year we were very close to pulling the trigger, mainly for the potato leafhoppers on the chestnuts. And by the time we really got to a point where we wanted to pull the trigger, it was kind of already too late for them. And so we identified, though, with the potato leaf hopper, a couple different organic spray options and a couple different conventional options. Talk with the clients and to see what they would want to use. And now we have that information for next season or any seasons that we have where we identify it early enough and we find that that economical threshold has been hit, then we might pull the trigger. And we have those available. And we noticed a couple other pests that we've seen. The black locust this year, we had some problem with, I think it was honey locust beetle was the problem. And that was a whole new one that at first we thought it was herbicide drift. You know, a lot of the insect pest damage is really similar in appearance to a drift problem. So for us right now, we try to limit how much we actually are spraying for fungicides and insecticides, mainly because at the end of the day, they're really expensive. You know, just the labor to put them on. Most of the time, you have to keep repeatedly putting them on, and it's way cheaper to just identify the right cultivars at the right time. And I think for us too, we also benefit from most of our sites are relatively diverse and they're surrounded by diversity. Even if it's like a monocrop in the alleys themselves, we have typically 3 or 4 different species of ground cover, and almost all of our sites are surrounded by windbreaks that have typically some sort of pollinator habitat and dozens of tree species out there. So I do think that helps. We do see all the sites that we've planted and have taken over management. We see every year an increased diversity in songbirds, bird species, even the game birds. On the flip side, we also have been seeing more deer, more bulls, more rabbits. So, you know, with the pests, you also get a lot of beneficials, and so we do our best to really try to encourage the beneficials and do what we can to limit the all the pests that come along with it. So, yeah.
Well, we've been chatting for almost half an hour, and we haven't even talked a single word about weeds. Weeds.
That's the one that gets us.
Weeds and herbaceous competition. I feel like this is a really hot topic of conversation in agroforestry right now and farming in general forever, but specifically around what's the threshold that you need to get the tree up and going, and then what do you need to do to keep the tree healthy and produce for the long haul. So I wonder if you all could walk us through what you're doing and what you're exploring to try to find that balance.
Well, we heavily mulch around the tree tube the first couple of years that the tree is in the ground. And then after that, we don't add any more mulch. We just let it go. The mulch will degrade. You'll start getting grasses and things grow. But by then, your tree is really nice size and it can handle a lot of
It can
that.
handle some weed pressure.
Some weed pressure.
You just get the first couple of years. Keep it clean for the first couple of years with mulch, and then
Yeah.
then you turn a blind eye to the weeds.
Yeah, because we don't use herbicide either. We don't spray.
And you don't go around weed whacking on 2 acres. Not if you want to.
Yeah, and that's not a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't imagine
2 or
trying
2
that
to
on
3
100 acres.
You just can't do that on.
Yeah.
2 or 3 acres. You still don't want to do it, and I can understand using herbicides. And especially to get one started, one your plan started.
And there, in our conversation earlier, there was one oh shit moment that you realized afterwards was a mistake, which was using landscape fabric.
Never again. It's a waste of time. It gives some of the weed types that are spreading, once they get into those mats, which they do the first, or those pieces of landscape fabric, they're quite happy there. And then you start pulling on those, and then the whole thing comes up. So since I don't use herbicides, I try pulling one, the landscape fabric's done. So just very heavily mulch. Utility tractor, mulch pile from a tree service, you're good to go.
What about mowing?
We mow in between the rows and kind of right up to maybe a foot or so away from the plants. But we mow high because we have white clover and some other plants there that our bees really like. So we keep it mowed, but it's mowed high.
And
Except in the fall, whenever it's time to pick up chestnuts, and then I scalp the heck out of it down and drive my wife completely nuts.
Yeah, that was a question earlier,
Yeah.
how to balance maintenance with harvest efficiency.
Yeah.
Because you can't harvest chestnuts
And tall grass.
and tall grass.
Just can't. So
so he doesn't scalp down the whole thing. He just
just
scalps
just where
around
the chestnuts.
just
are.
where the chestnuts are going to be.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's a little annoying. Grass that tall, but okay.
I try to get lower than that.
Mowing
I like to
dirt.
kick dirt out.
Yeah.
And Eric, Canopy utilized some different things. So
Yeah.
landscape fabric was a no, but weed mats?
Yeah,
Someone asked a
so
question about.
we still do a pretty, again, we have plenty of clients. So we had taken over management for a site for a client that had used wood chip mulch, and that was 3 or 4 years before we'd even started working with them. And they put it down so thick it was still holding back the majority of the weeds, and they'd only done half their field because the labor on putting out mulch, especially for currants where it's entire strips that you have to put out, they got about halfway through and were like, we can't afford to keep doing this. But you can see a difference already in the mulch. Those currants that are mulched are happier, they grow better, and the weeds are better under control. We also do Plantra also sells the 3x3 or 4x4 plastic sheets. And so we use that for some of our clients, and those seem to work pretty well. They do a good job of keeping the soil moisture in place. But we have also noticed that if you get the mower anywhere close to them, it sucks them right up, and that gets really frustrating. Again, it's really windy where we're at, so we've noticed that if those weed mats are in herbicide strips as well, or areas that just have low vegetative cover, that wind will rip them off or throw up edges. Where it's, they were put in early after a disc field, after planting, and then, the crops, the ground cover has grown up around it. Those ones work a lot better. They stay a lot better in place. But again, as soon as you get that mower close to them, you can sometimes have issues.
They've been there, done that.
So that's a tough one.
Yeah, that's an oh shit when you have to pull
Yep.
those out of your blades.
It's not as bad as the irrigation line, in my opinion. If I was gonna pick one. Lines.
How many feet can you suck up?
Oh man, I know those flail mowers. I mean, you can take a whole 200-foot roll and put just out there, and you have an hour project of getting it unwrapped. So, yeah, and we've also used weed fabric as well. One of our sites for the elderberries, we put weed fabric down, and it's in year 2. It's worked pretty well, but we still have issues with them fraying, and the bulls love it. I mean, the bulls absolutely love that weed fabric. They get underneath there and they have their whole tunnel system in place, and it makes them just that much easier to get in at those elderberry right where they need to.
Yeah, I understand that doing the mulching only is labor intensive, but the way I look at it is like in the area that we put our plant in, it was degraded, and I'm trying to rebuild soil and bring back fungal activity, more organic matter into the soil. So it's, yes, labor intensive, but I'm soil building at the same time. So it's okay.
You get those,
Yes.
it keeps the soil cooler. There's a lot of benefits to the wood mulch.
And I am starting now after these, like a couple of years ago, I started seeing fungal activity finally.
Yep. And one other thing we're actually working on, we just got the equipment for it. We're hoping to really start trialing it next season, is we got a side discharge flail mower. And so the idea there is that we'll actually be in our alleys be growing stuff like buckwheat and other cover crops. And then when we go and do our termination mowing or just continual mowing in we use a pasture mix, blowing that into the rows. So then we at least are growing our mulch. I don't think, my guess is it's not gonna be quite as effective as a wood mulch because it's not as carbon heavy. Wood mulch is so dense, it doesn't break down as quickly. But the fact that we can do it just as a side product of a task we're already doing 5 times.
Green fertilizer.
And I think think if we get the timing right, get those white clovers in there, I think we're hopeful that that's going to be a new tool in the toolbox, but we want to trial it out, make sure it's actually effective. I'd say for us, 95% of what we do is herbicides, though, especially at scale, and especially because we're at that mobile level. Whenever we do establishment plantings for people, and we're going to plant, we're going to have everything done, and then we won't see the site again. We always use a pre-emerge is what we rely on heavily. So we try to use herbicides that stay in the top couple inches of the soil, keep the seeds from germinating, or at least keep the weeds from getting above cotyledon stage. And then there's a lot of the oh shit moments when that might not work, and we do a lot of post-emergence and trying to get the weeds out. And we also do some in-row tillage. We have a machine that allows us to go right into the tree rows themselves, and it bounces off of the trees. And that one works. It's a pretty slow process, but it beat in the past we've gone through and even just used a push tiller because the weeds had gotten so bad. Some of those sites, it's not until you've already planted your trees in that you get the report from the neighbors that, oh, that was a weed patch. That wasn't a soybean field. That was amaranth. And so a lot of learning on that. And again, the amount of different sites that we visit and manage, we have a whole range of what the weed problems are going to be, what the weed ecology is like. And so we have to have quite a toolbox of solutions there.
Yeah. So we talked about mowing, we talked about mulch, we talked about herbicide. Let's talk a little bit about ground cover, because that also can be used as a management solution to keeping weeds down and providing some diversity on the landscape. What's been successful and what would you not recommend?
Our white clover has been done quite well. And then what we've also done is up against some of the trees is the planted comfrey.
Yeah, we've planted comfrey around.
We've planted comfrey everywhere out there, and it really,
when you have comfrey, and it never
goes away.
It never goes away.
But it really, just in the way it grows, the leaves are going out, and they help kind of keep the weeds down, as well as adding the green fertilizer, because they're drawing nutrients from really, really deep down in the ground up to the surface
And then laying over.
and
That they are the whatever trees that they're with. It's their own private fertilizer source. So
Have you seen any collar rot or any issues with fungal things on the
trees.
trunk from comfrey?
Not from the comfrey. The only really issue we had with any kind of a fungus or on the base of the trees was because we didn't get the tree tubes off, and it really held moisture, especially whenever you have leaves down in there, and it was essentially leaves rotting inside the tube. That would be the only thing about we did have 1 or 2 years when we implemented this where we lifted the tubes off of every tree. Yeah, because it was cleaned up all the leaves. Yeah, let the base rot or let the voles and stuff that at them. So it was like, which do we pick your poison?
Mm-hmm.
So,
what about ground covers that Canopy is utilizing?
So our kind of go-to for ground covers is white clover. We really like white clover. We'll throw in usually a perennial ryegrass and like a creeping red fescue, and that mix usually does pretty well for us. We get planted on time. And once it gets established in, it's a really nice mix. It stays relatively low. It's got the flowers that do really well for the bees and the pollinators. And so we really like that one. We've had issues. I mean, the past 2 years, we've had drought seasons. And so that mix does not do well at establishment when it's going into a drought year. And so we've planted stuff and it grew and then it shriveled up and died, or we had an outbreak of armyworms last year at one of our sites, and
we had that
ate all of the grasses, and our clover did okay, but there's no grasses in there with it. And so we also do a lot of cover cropping and in between our tree rows. We really like that sorghum Sudan grass, just grows so fast. I don't think it always outcompetes the big weed for us is water hemp. And so that one can sometimes keep up with the sorghum, but it does a really good job of for the most part, keeping most of that down. We usually add cowpeas in with that mix, just give it a little extra nitrogen in there. We did a mix this year with Savanna Institute and added in sunflowers and sun hemp as well to that mix, and that was a beautiful one. I love the sunflowers just kind of spattered throughout. You know, it really adds a nice flair. We do a lot of winter rye. We put more winter rye out this season. Sometimes turnips. So we like to mix it up a little bit. And again, as we're looking into the mow and blow method, we're I think going to be doing a lot more experiments with some cover crops and where those might land. Because again, if we could do like a vetch or clover or something in the fall, and then kick it straight out first thing in the spring, I think those trees would really love that. And then can mix into maybe a carbon heavy kind of mix of some sort, oats or something like that. So that's been a big one. And the other thing that we're kind of wanting to experiment with more is the living mulches, something we can put underneath the trees that don't really compete as much with the tree crops, but still keep the competitive enough to keep the weeds out. And we've seen some good examples of that, using like white clover or something where people have direct seeded some pecans or some persimmons, threw out some white clover on top of it, all surrounded by pasture. And that white clover, for the most part, had kept most of those weeds back, and the pecans and persimmons didn't seem to mind a whole lot. You know, they might have been a little stunted, but nothing too crazy. So a lot of hopeful ideas down the line.
Yeah, as long as there's nothing noxious, which
The
we have a lot of,
thistle and-
we have a lot of issues with invasive and noxious
The nightshade and the thistle and
and hemlock.
Poison hemlock.
Yes, I have it.
we have a lot.
I have a burn on my hand from that, but that has never healed.
Stinging nettle.
Well, stinging nettle is okay.
Yeah.
I think she's.
That's medicine.
I think she is the only person that I know of that ever bought
I did not buy it. It was a gift. Okay.
stinging nettle seeds.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's just leave that.
So we only have a couple more minutes where we're going to open up for more questions, and I want to talk. There's been a couple of questions in the chat about labor and labor hours and mechanization and what you're doing to make things easier. And you mentioned drought. Drought is something we're going to predict and see every year. Aging is something that we are going to predict and see every year.
I hope.
Yeah, right.
That's my
We're
plan.
gonna see aging every year, but we're gonna be growing older with these systems. So, what are you deploying, either equipment wise, or strategy wise, or timing wise, to help ease the strain on bodies and on the pocketbook too?
Well, our
I would say,
our side by side,
yeah, or side by side is good.
which is our roving toolbox, has been almost it
Indispensable.
gets used every day.
Indispensable.
Yeah. So
And I have a photo of it, so let me pull it up here.
things. We're having tool envy here. Yeah.
Well, timing is also pretty critical on all this. You want to get your systems up to a certain point where you don't have as much of the
Yeah.
very heavy physical labor.
Yeah. So if you become old like us, you try to
Speak for
find
yourself.
you find tools that are lighter and easier to handle. And one of them for the pruning, which I'm not a fan of pruning. My wife is. I call her a little tree killer. But anyway, this little gadget here is absolutely fantastic.
The Milwaukee hacksaw.
Hacksaw for pruning. It's lightweight, battery operated. You can work all day up
They can
here.
keep it above your head.
You can cut off up to 3.5, 4-inch branches with no problem. And one of the things that's really great, we have an electric chainsaw too, which I was not a fan of electric chainsaws until we got it. And then she can use it. It's easy to start because there's no pull. But we'll cut, if we're taking down invasives like honeysuckle or some of the other trees that we don't want around, whenever you want to get it down to the dirt, the worst thing you can do with a chainsaw is put it in the dirt because it's dull immediately. This little thing here, you can get down in the dirt under the ground and cut, and it will never go dull. It is just nuts. So this thing gets used an awful lot. It's a great tool.
And it's, yeah,
And I'm gonna share my screen here and show off your rig because the first time I saw it, I was very impressed by it. And I had tool envy because I was at the time I was working for what's now Canopy Farm Management and rolling around in an ATV where I had to balance all of my tools on an already dangerous. It's gonna take a lot of living. Okay, so here it is.
Yeah. This is my Polaris side by side. And I built this little tool rack on it out of just PVC pipe. And it'll hold all my shovels, it'll hold the
the weed.
weed whacker, on the other side, hold more shovels and
There's a 35-gallon.
35-gallon water tank in the back of it for when we're planting, we always will water.
That bucket for beekeeping.
Beekeeping stuff,
And then
loppers, you name it, it's on that thing, and it goes everywhere on the property. We have a little trailer that hooks up behind it for whenever we're out pruning and doing things. We can carry stuff around in that. So this thing here has been indispensable for old people, and it would probably work for you youngins out there too. But for old people, it's great.
And Eric, what are you doing at Canopy?
Um,
Try to make it more efficient and more cost effective.
yeah, so we try to, we don't have the side by side. We have the trucks. We try to get our trucks well organized so that we can have them, you know, available for any of the things that might be breaking down in the field or needing the pruners. So that's one thing. We do a fair amount of tractor work, and so trying to get stuff where we can, you know, throw it to the buckets and everything like that. For our tree planter, we now have got it set up so it's doing everything all in one pass. And then yeah, that's been a big push for us is getting, you know, trying to move away as much as possible away from like the weed whacking, hand management to tractor and machinery. Because we're young, but our backs still hurt. And when you're doing it for an entire season, your back really starts to hurt, and we're too young to be doing that. So we do our best to find the right equipment that, again, make sure it's actually cost effective. But a lot of times, if we can be avoiding as much of the hand labor and instead doing more machinery labor, that we found that to work really well for us. And again, we have people of all different sizes and stuff on staff, so we have to find stuff that's not just for the, you know, the big corn-fed boys. You know, we need to have everyone's got to be able to use the machinery. So we try to get as much stuff as possible that is changeable. We can change, you know, the steering angle or the seats, making sure that we're able to fit the full range of bodies that we use.
And
So,
that's actually huge because we have two utility. Well, we have an industrial and a utility tractor,
mhm.
and they are not designed for women to use.
No.
So size wise, I struggle to use that equipment. I think it's better. My stuff is older, but I think it's better, I would hope, with more modern equipment.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Yeah, because it is a back killer because just the leg length
Uh-huh.
is set up for men.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's we've been really trying to find, you know, again, yeah, the stuff that's going to work for everybody because agriculture hasn't done a great job of making it for everybody. It's been very selective on who can use it. So, but we've also found that that's on the flip side. We found stuff that worked for our smaller, you know, smaller size staff, and then the bigger staff can't always get in the machinery properly, and they're bumping their heads and stuff like that. So we found both windows there, and we try to be conscious of all of it, and it's something that, you know,
You just have to work around it.
yep, that's kind of it.
Yeah. So before we open it up to the floor for questions and comments and stories, I have a two-part question for each of you. What problem have you not been able to solve? And if you had a magic wand, you would fix it right away. And then the second question is, what has succeeded beyond your wildest dreams?
I would think, I'm
What
not sure. it would-
problem have we not solved?
Well, I think, I'm not sure it would be a problem, but trying to become accepted in our bean and soybean, corn, soybean area as being legit. Everybody thinks it's a fad, it's a phase, you can't make money off of that. You can't, like, well, we weren't really in it to make money. When we first started this, it was like, if we don't make a dime off of this place,
Have good food.
have good food, and we're doing something good for the environment, we love it. But we're finding out we can't make money off of it, and it's going to be good. But still, the people in our area, and this is people I've grown up with and lived with all my life, thinking we're nuts just because we're growing nuts. So,
Yeah,
but then I don't know how we're ever going to change their attitude. It's just, crazy.
yeah. What has succeeded beyond our wildest dreams?
The
Pawpaws.
pawpaws. I was
Yeah.
really,
Still-
I've struggled for years and years and years, even before I got involved in this. I always liked pawpaws, even as a little kid. And I tried to plant seeds. I tried to grow trees. I could not get a pawpaw to grow to save my life. And I finally figured out, with the help of Tom Wall from Redmond, the secret to growing pawpaws. And now
And now we're harvesting pawpaws
harvesting pawpaws.
at 1 pound and better.
Oh, yeah. So that's just,
Yeah, I would
I-
never have thought we'd got a 1 pound pawpaw, but you saw it there, the picture, yes. That is unbelievable.
yep.
Congrats.
But you're right, the community, they have nicknames for us because we're doing something that they don't understand.
Yeah, I'm Captain Chestnut.
Sad.
I figure if I don't, they will just
Make it worse.
make it worse. So, whenever they get on me about it, I'm like, yes, I am.
What about for you, Eric? What do you need your magic wand for, and what's been beyond your wildest
I think
dreams?
definitely convincing the surrounding farmers, not getting cussed out by them would be a great place to start. But yeah, I think if I could magic wand it, for me, it's always been weed control. If I could find that one that I could throw it out there, no weeds would grow and my trees would grow just exactly the same. That'd be my magic wand. I'd be so happy with that. That's that's probably 70% of our work in the summertime.
Yeah.
It's like dealing with weeds.
You're dealing with a much grander problem. We can absorb a few weeds. It's like,
Yeah.
they got to live too.
But this is, we had talked earlier, it's part of our aging process. We go out there and we walk, and so I can take a pair of pruners and I can whack off a hemlock or
Thistle
thistle or a walnut that's in the wrong place or whatever.
Mm.
I can do that and I'm fine. But once the acreage starts increasing, then that becomes a problem.
I had pictures of a 40-acre pigweed field that was supposed to have trees in there.
Yeah, I can't even.
Pollinators and everything else. So that's the one for me. I think that would be the real dream is finding that and knowing that it works well and
It's not toxic, yeah.
not toxic. That's the other big one, spraying just relying on herbicides and the herbicides don't always work either. So I've done organic and it hasn't worked before. I've done conventional, it had not worked before. Done all of it, and there's levels of success and failure on all of them. So
Well, the weeds are becoming resistant to herbicide.
everything,
Now, I haven't found one yet that's resistant to a hoe.
Yep. Yep, good old iron applications.
What's succeeded?
Honestly, that 40-acre pigweed field now has trees and no pigweed. Come out to the site in Urbana, and that's one of the many
Farm.
successes. It's beautiful when it, you put a lot of time, put a lot of money into it, and when it works, it feels great, So and going out there and seeing it and seeing watch my dogs play out there and they're loving it, you know, that's a really good feeling.
Yeah. And I'll just add to that too, because Eric's talking about Hudson Farm, and he's gone through the roller coaster and I've gone through the roller coaster with that farm. If you would have asked us last year what was going the worst, it would have been that 40-acre pigweed field. And now we're both so excited to go out there because every day it's more and more abundant and more beautiful. And it was the worst field last year and the best field this year, thanks to partnerships and figuring out, and a lot of oh shit moments, a lot of tears, a lot of curse words. So
Being a gas. What are you gonna do about this?
Yeah, I can see the left.
yeah,
Yep.
1 year can make a huge difference.
Yeah. Laying in bed, just having those, just thinking, scheming. Okay, what are we gonna do? What's gonna work? What's gonna be the options?
Well, we're at 12:36 now. We want to open it up to the audience. So Lucas, if you are ready, I know there's lots of questions in the chat that we haven't been able to get to. So
Yeah. Yes, we have lots of great questions. And the first that I would like to ask, and this comes from Carol, and I believe it's geared towards Mark and Tammy, asking about, were your tree plantings supported by NRCS or Farm Service Agency funding? Any support there?
No, it was all on ours since we weren't on a piece of property that had a crop history. We really couldn't get any CPR.
CPR.
CRP.
Sometimes we needed CPR. Hey, that's a good old shit. Yeah. I'm a retired firefighter, so I've talked about CPR all the time. So, but yeah, no, everything was on us. We did get a little bit of assistance with the pollinator belt that we planted all the way around the property, and a little bit of assistance when we put up our hoop house. But as far as the plantings themselves, that was all on us.
Yeah, but Canopy does help people utilize that funding.
Yeah, we work with pretty much all of our clients. I think for the most part have done at least some form of CRP or equip or CREP or all the different ones that are out there. We have some people on staff that really know which ones are geared for what they're trying to do. But we also have done some planting for people that had none of that. They just wanted trees out there, and so pretty diverse there.
Great. Next question here is, how do you balance species diversity with harvesting efficiency?
Why do we got berries and apples and chestnuts, and how is it during the harvest? We're small enough that it really doesn't affect us that much because we do all hand harvesting anyway. If we were going to do mechanical harvesting, we
couldn't do, we can't actually do any
Right.
mechanical.
But if we would have thought about doing it for the future, we would have completely planted everything.
It would have been all
different.
all completely different. You can't turn a modern piece of equipment around in our field.
Yeah, we've got a little utility tractor that we can turn around in there, but you're not going to get any equipment in there, and we never even considered that whenever we started planting. We knew that we were going to be doing all hand harvesting.
Yeah, that's one I can actually talk to you quite a bit. We've gone through the whole round of it. When I first started at the University of Illinois, one of the sites I planted had currants and chestnuts all in the same row. And down the line, we got a harvester, berry harvester for the site. And we go out and we look, we're like, well, we have trees in the way. So we made that perennial polyculture part 2, and that one we made sure that the currants had their own rows and the trees had their own rows. And so for us, it was a change from like a mixed polyculture where the mixing is on a meter square to a landscape scale. So we still had polycultures, we still had diversity on the site. It was just only 1 acre scale, you know. Then we had 10 species on an acre, but they all had their own rows, and that allowed us to do a lot of the machine operations. And then the second thing was in those rows that we already had the currents in, we kind of schemed around and we came up with we ended up using olive shakers that were pneumatic. So we just drove along and we made out of aluminum, we crafted like a big catchment system. And luckily, you know, we had some amazing shop people that were like, okay, I love this kind of project, you know, some sheet aluminum and some rivets, and they were able to throw it together for us, and we were able to drag him with a little riding lawnmower and a side by side. And then there, we could harvest right in between. We dropped our labor by 10 times for harvesting. And so part of it's scheming and finding, you know, the weird things that they haven't designed for. And the other side was just better planning on how to actually line them up. Ahead of time, you know, it's gonna be machinery. You got to go a different kind of planting style, but still maintaining that landscape scale diversity, I think.
Next question is about mowing. Kind of a two-parter. What is your usual mowing load like during the season, schedule-wise? And then you had mentioned height for mowing, trying to avoid that white clover. Do you have specific measurements of what is that height that you're typically mowing at throughout the growing season?
On the clover, I am mowing as high as my deck will go, which is between 5 and 6 inches. And then next to the trees, we're at about 3 inches. So,
Yeah,
and then it's scalping when it's time for harvest.
yeah, and then as far as schedule, you just mow it whenever it gets to that height. This year there wasn't a lot of mowing because we were in serious drought. But in a normal year, she does most of the mowing in between the rows. It's probably once
10 days to 2 weeks.
yeah, 10 days to 2
To
weeks.
keep that height correct for the clover, because my bees do rely on that for forage.
Great. And speaking of droughts, we had a question just broadly about irrigation. Is there any thoughts you'd like to provide about how you like to irrigate or challenges that you've come across with irrigation?
All the challenges. Yeah, irrigation's irritation. It can be a real pain, but at the same time, it's, you know, for some of, especially for the crops, you know, for growing for production, black currants in particular, the elderberries, we have to have irrigation. And you got to put that in the ground. You know, we use drip line with either underground headers or lay flat tubing that connects to a single riser. We try to tuck them in as best as possible next to the plants so that we're not hitting it with the mower, slurping it up like a spaghetti noodle. And it makes management really difficult. If you're going out there with the weed whacker and you hit those just right, you snap it, and now you have a irrigation leak. I have dozens of photos of I have a helper that comes out that does a really good job of finding all my irrigation leaks. My dog, she comes back muddy. Okay, we got irrigation leak somewhere. And she finds them. She has got a really good ear for it or nose. I'm not sure how she does it, but you get a lot of leaks. You're always fixing it, but at the same time, I can water. It's the only way I can water 15 acres. Last year, couple of our plantings, we actually went through and irrigated with a 500-gallon or 1,000-gallon tank that we were pulling on a flatbed or on a trailer.
Oh.
And it's a hassle, but you know, some of those years, that was the only way that we had hope for getting some of those trees to establish. Once they have those roots in the ground, they're trees. So they might not grow, but they typically don't die. The evergreens are the ones that we see the biggest issue with. The evergreens, I'm not sure if they just take too long to get the roots in the ground or what, but they tend to get hit the hardest. Our hybrid poplars don't care at all. It can be a drought year and they'll still put on 6 feet and have no care in the world. So it's pretty varied, but for the most part, if it's anything that's food production related, we try to throw irrigation on. We're in Central Illinois. Like in good years, we get pretty consistent rainfalls. Usually just around July and August that we start to, historically dry up. it's just, I think as our climates keep shifting, we're moving into some sort of the heavy monsoon seasons in the spring, followed by the really heavy drought periods that keep kind of creeping early and earlier along. So it's definitely something that's a challenge, and drip line is probably what we do primarily to address that.
Great. I have a question about tree tubes. Has there been any issue with rodents getting inside of tree tubes? And if so, have you been able to solve that problem?
Yes, they get in. No, we haven't solved the problem. They have a knack of getting into just about anywhere, or into anything, no matter what. You can
You can just make it as difficult.
make
as
it
possible.
difficult, but the
Yeah.
tubes close to the ground as you can get them will help. But if they want to, they can still go under it,
They will go under it, yeah.
or they can crawl up the sides and go in through the top. So they if they want in, they will find a way in.
There's really no solution that I'm aware
Just
of.
just don't,
Yeah.
if you got a lot of snakes out in your orchard or your field, leave them,
Keep them happy.
keep them happy. Make sure you have a lot of hawks if you got anything you can put up for hawk
Attracting.
attracting, nesting or anything.
We've noticed coyotes also.
Coyotes,
Yep, we actually kind of like them out there.
people don't like coyotes, but tree growers and
They
stuff
are
love
part- they
coyotes.
are part of the rodent. They are part of what keeps the rodents under control.
I think they're one of the better ones too, snakes and
Snake- And
coyotes.
we have a lot of minks, they are,
The minks are
they'll take care of it.
very voracious. And we'll go through and actually lift up tubes sometime in the winter, and we'll pull out nests. And that's also
Mhm.
kind of a
Mhm.
better way. And
Yep.
again, that's another thing my dog's good at, is finding nests and doing some good vermin control. So
Yeah, and one thing that we'll also do at the end of the season is to mow a little bit lower and to keep weeds out so that there's not a lot of nesting material for them to go
that's
for.
probably one of the big advantages that we've found with the herbicides, is we do keep about a 4 to 6 foot barrier around each tree. And that tends to help a lot with keeping those voles from, they really don't like crossing those big empty ground spaces. So that tends to help, but sometimes that means they just dig underneath that level, and they got tunnels everywhere. So we've seen it work and not work for everything.
And speaking of promoting these kind of natural predation processes, is there been any consideration for creating refuge areas on your property, or even things like bird boxes?
Yeah, we've got bluebird boxes and wren boxes all over
Everywhere.
wherever we can put them. And we're fortunate enough that our property is surrounded on two different sides by about 600 acres of conservation. So we have a lot of coyotes, we have a lot of hawks, lots of different varieties of hawks. We have a few bald eagles in the area. We don't hunt the coyotes or try to make the coyotes stay away. We welcome the coyotes. We welcome the snakes. So that would be the only thing I could think of right there. Is just we just let nature be nature out there and don't mess with it.
Yeah, we put up roost poles. We try to get those every couple acres, and that tends to help some.
Yeah, the hawks like to set up.
Yep,
And-
and like to kind of sit up on there, and owls, we hope, are doing it as well. But I honestly, the voles are just so prolific. I think I've seen full families of hawks, in some of our sites, and we still have a massive vole problem.
Yeah.
So again, I think the snakes is a big one. I have heard of people putting out, kind of rock beds and stuff. But we haven't done any of that necessarily just yet. Got brush piles, but that seems to just keep the rabbits.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's why we chip.
Yep.
Chip everything because, yeah, I don't want to create rabbit habitat.
Mhm.
There's enough there.
Okay, switching gears here, thinking about resource sharing, have there been any really useful resources that you'd like to promote at this time, or another way of thinking about it is who do you turn to for help in terms of planning and maintenance?
Savanna Institute.
Yeah. Savannah. We got involved with Savannah Institute probably
Very early.
very early. It was probably one of the very first farm meetings that they ever had up at Elmwood near Peoria.
Mhm.
And there was 30 people in a farmhouse living room and sitting around talking. And it was great. It was fantastic. And now I think the last one we went to that we actually met
In
before
person.
COVID, there was almost 300 people. And we have learned more from the people from Savannah Institute than any book, any anything. I mean, there's
Any
just a,
YouTube video, yeah.
there's just a great amount of,
There's a lot of information out there, and
and they're willing to share it.
they're willing to share it, and the experience on, on boots on the ground experience. And that's where you're going to get all of your information.
Yeah, Apex as well, Northern Nut Growers as well. I think all of them we rely on them quite a bit. There's a mass network of the agroforesters, and so try to talk to them as much as you can. We found Extension sometimes has some good, very specific resources. If we're looking for what the heck is eating our black locust, we go to Extension. They do a good job of providing some good, little PDFs that we can access, sometimes YouTube videos. And then, yeah, a lot of just other farmers as well. Yeah, across the board.
Yeah. Well, it's just like us talking together and we'll find out you're great big, we're little bitty, but we're having the exact
Same
same
problem.
So,
Yep, weeds are weeds, no matter, regardless of your size or your strategic management.
Up next, I have a two-part question. Mark and Tammy, we saw your side-by-side rig, and we saw the hacksaw that you were mentioning as in terms of helpful tools. A two-part question would be, are there any other tools that you would like to shout out as being particularly helpful in your kind of day-to-day operations? And then the second part to that question is there a tool that you really see that there's a lot of room for improvement in for your particular needs?
Well, one of the newer favorites is, and which we didn't think we would like, is an electric chainsaw. Okay, so Mark and I are in our 60s. Pulling a chainsaw, pulling the pull cord on a chainsaw can start, it hurts in your shoulder and in your neck. And these little electric chainsaws, battery electric chainsaws now have really come a long way. And I can use one over my head quite easily, where I couldn't do that with a gas operated one. I love that little electric saw.
yeah. And I would say to
A lot of-
carry what we do when we go for our walks, which is almost like twice a day, carry a good pair of hand pruners in your pocket because you're always walking around out there and you
yeah,
except me, Tammy. She thinks that little twig needs to be, or that little branch. And so, if you just walk through there daily, that's a really nice tool to carry.
what tool needs room for improvement? Needs room for improvement. We've narrowed it down pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Now.
What do you think, Eric? You spent a lot of time thinking about this question of what needs to be improved.
Man, chainsaws are weed whips, weed whackers. I mean, if they made those so they don't,
So
a
you're
couple
not
hours
changing-
later your hands aren't shaking.
And not changing string every
Yep.
5 minutes.
Only thing that leaves it around everywhere.
Yeah.
I'd love to see some like
Yeah.
biodegradable, string.
That is a good.
That's one that I would love to see a change on. In-row management is always one I've been trying to find a better way of doing that. Besides the weed whacker, what other options are there? That's one I'd love to. There's a lot of good ones. Vegetable farming has a lot, obviously, and trying to get those into the tree crop world is a big push for us.
Great.
Yeah.
Question about sanitizing your tools. Is that something you spend a lot of time doing? Is that a big consideration? Can you speak to that a little bit?
I do it.
Yeah, I would say it's something to do all the time, but we carry a spray bottle of peroxide and the side by side. So our pruners and stuff
The pruners and the hacksaw.
and the hacksaw get a spray of that.
Yeah, I had a situation where I had fire black move in a couple of years ago. And I've managed to get it under control, but I was very diligent about carrying around hydrogen peroxide in a spray bottle. You get the right tools, it makes using that spray bottle a little easier. Because if you're up there with a like a bow saw or a pruning saw, you just
There's a lot of spraying.
yeah, there's a yeah. You yeah, it just becomes a frustration.
Yeah.
Yes, I carry hydrogen peroxide with me, and I managed to get the fire blight under control. It is gone this year. I haven't seen any, or this last season, I did not see any fire blight. It's worth it to do that.
Yeah, we do the same. We use rubbing alcohol, but yeah, same exact thing. We try to prune depending on the species and depending on what the problem is. If it's basic pruning on a, black locust, we don't do it between every cut.
No,
When we're disease pruning out
Yeah.
bad cane dieback,
yeah,
we prune every single, or we spray every single cut.
Yeah.
So
because yeah,
kind of have to.
if you start losing stuff to disease, you start losing years of work. So that little extra time
Goes a long way.
with a spray bottle goes a long, long way.
Thinking about the future of the operations that Eric, that you help manage, and of course Mark and Tammy, your operation. Are there any exciting developments that you're looking forward to or plans? Seeing as this is partially a beyond planning webinar, anything in the works that you'd like to discuss or to share with folks?
Well, I think we talked a little bit about just trying to be accepted more in the community about what we're doing. And then some of the trees and plants that we have put out, just seeing them produce for the first time. Like our pecans. It took 20 years before we started getting pecans. But like chestnuts and pawpaws, it took like 6 years. So to see how all of this stuff is going to increase each year, and to see our trees grow and have an actual canopy out there to where we can, when we're walking under it, I just think that would be the coolest thing in the world.
It has been one of my hopes. Ultimately, once I get a substantial enough of a chestnut crop, that I can engage some high school age students to come out and harvest for me and pay me a certain price per pound. And then ultimately, since they come in the fall, they can take those chestnuts and prepare them for sale for football games. So that way they can, I don't have to harvest the crop, they do it. And then they can then increase funding for their sports. And I think that would be, and you're keeping it in the community. So that's one of the things that I've been hoping for. But we haven't quite gotten there on the chestnut crop yet, the size of the crop that we would need. And there again, like Mark talks about acceptance. How many people do you know that have never even tried a chestnut? So we're still working
Or
on
a
it.
pawpaw.
Or a pawpaw. Yeah, we're still working on it.
Or persimmon.
Yeah. Well, people have the perception of a persimmon just sucking the life out of it whenever they put it.
Well,
And like, I'm not tasting that thing. No. Really, that one's different. You need to try it.
yeah,
I tried before. You know.
Yeah, I guess for me, I kind of already talked about it. For us, it's finding the different tools to make our management, more effective and more sustainable economically and environmentally and culturally. So, I'm looking forward to us finding the new plant species as lots of ground cover and looking for maybe the new tools for weeding more effectively, or
Mhm.
mulching the rows. That's kind of our big one that we're really hoping to, in a couple years do the same talk, and I can show the pictures of that stuff that works, and tell you all the stuff. Just like the tree tubes, these ones work, these ones don't work, and these are the modifications we have to make it work.
And it looks like our keynote's about to start, so let me come around the table here. Thank you, everyone, for this awesome session. Enjoy Ross's keynote. Thank you, Eric and Tammy and Mark, for this amazing conversation today.
And
Are there-
if anybody wants to contact us, get a hold of Kaitie, feel free to talk to us.
Yep.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to share.